Hey everyone, welcome to EDU 5105. In this video, I'm hoping to demystify the MLC process a bit for you. So I'm going to introduce the MLCs, or Multiliteracy Circles, that we're going to be doing during the semester, specifically within modules 2 through 5. I'm also going to share some tips based on my previous experience doing MLC groups, and as well as some tips that my previous learners have shared with me. And this video applies to both sections of this course this semester, so it doesn't matter if you're being taught by me or if you're being taught by Angus. We're following the same process here. In this video, I'm going to use a few clips that I've used in a previous MLC video, since some of the elements are going to be the same as when I last did MLCs. And I'm also going to insert some new clips here with information that's specific to this class. So my hair length and color will change a little bit throughout this video. So without further delay, let's pass things over to Past Rachel.
So let's start things off with what are MLC groups. So multiliteracy circles are a variation on literacy circles. So online literature circles consist of small student-led groups of learners who meet virtually to discuss the course readings. And there are different roles that are meant to help guide this discussion, and group members rotate through these different roles. And these are meant to be really collaborative and are focused on bringing your own experiences and knowledge into your discussions of the readings. Now, what makes this format that we're using in this class a multiliteracy circle versus a traditional literacy circle? Well, with MLCs, we go beyond traditional print media like textbooks and articles. With our increasingly technological world, literacy is now multimodal, and we need to be able to interact with electronic media. Thus, there's a need to develop these multiliteracy skills. So in the MLC format, you'll be bringing in sources beyond textbooks and articles, like videos and websites. And the benefit of using these MLC circles is that it adds a social element into our class. And one article I found reports that some graduate students have formed friendships with other students through MLC groups like this. And this is consistent with my own experiences using MLCs in the online classes that I teach. So how are we actually going to be doing this MLC process in our class? So as I said, these MLC groups are the small literacy circles that you'll be working with this semester. So these will be about 4 to 5 members, and throughout the MLC modules, you'll be rotating through 4 different roles, including the director, facilitator, summarizer, and commentator. So the director. So the director is in charge of providing overall leadership during their MLC module. So the director will be taking responsibility for things like meeting logistics, making sure is everyone on top of everything like deadlines, connecting with me if needed, and providing support to the facilitator during the group discussion if there's anything they need help with. They're also responsible for sharing an additional resource with their group that aligns with the topic covered in that module to provoke discussion. So this is really where that multiliteracy piece comes in. For example, this could be a video, book review, news article, blog post, website, infographic, etc. And you can do journal articles here too if you like. And the facilitator is the person who is leading the discussion portion of that module. So they are responsible for creating discussion questions for their group based on the readings and the additional resource that the director will be sharing. They may also plan some sort of activity for their group if they would like to do that in lieu of a discussion question. So in the past, I've had students do word clouds and mind maps. And they are responsible for facilitating the meeting, whether this is asynchronous or synchronously. So posing questions and making sure everyone gets the opportunity to contribute to the discussion. And the summarizer's role is quite straightforward. They're just responsible for taking notes during the group's discussion, and then they're going to write that up into a little summary, which they will then be posting onto Brightspace so other groups can read it. And they will share this at the end of their module as the summarizer. And the commentator's main responsibilities really come in at the end of the module. So they will review all of those posts that were made by the summarizers and write a summary to share with their group. So some summarizers do this by going group by group, and some like to focus on overarching themes they saw or potentially points of contention between different groups. So the general flow of this whole process is that at the beginning of the module, you're completing the readings, and the director is looking for an additional resource. This then gets sent out to the rest of the group. The entire group reviews the resources that were shared, and our facilitator writes some discussion questions or plans some activities. The group then meets, and more on this in a moment, to discuss the discussion questions or participate in the activity that's been planned. And during the meeting, the summarizer is taking notes, which they post to Brightspace for the rest of the class. The commentator then goes into the Brightspace discussion board, reads them, and circulates a summary of these posts to their group. So what are the deadlines for this? So in your MLC guide, I have included some proposed timelines for you to follow. and this is based on what's worked well for previous students. I've also outlined the due dates in tables for each of the roles. However, you may want to shift some of these around depending on your schedules. And while I have recommended one meeting during the module, synchronous groups, for example, often prefer to meet weekly, and sometimes asynchronous groups just kind of like to chat throughout the week. So as long as your group is happy with the schedule that you've come up with and it isn't impeding anybody's learning, I'm fine with you playing around with these dates. However, I do ask that the summarizers try to get their summary posted to Brightspace by the second Thursday of the module. I will say from previous experiences doing this, it's very, very stressful for the commentators when the summarizers leave everything to Sunday night. So it is very stressful for the commentators when Sunday night rolls around and a lot of the summarizers have not yet posted their summaries for them. So commentators, if you find that yourself in that situation, just summarize what is posted, get it to your group, and just move on to the next module.
So how are you going to be actually meeting since this is an online class? You can meet virtually, synchronously, or asynchronously. So synchronously means you're all online at the same time, and then asynchronously would be when you come to the conversation throughout the module at different times. You don't have to commit to being only synchronous or asynchronous. Your team may decide to alternate throughout the semester depending what your schedules are like. Some popular platforms that have been used by students in the past include WhatsApp, Google Docs, and Zoom. Some people have also used Google Slides with the notes section at the bottom. They'll have their discussion in the notes section. So they may have each slide being a specific question or activity, and then they discuss within the notes. Angus and I will also be making Brightspace discussion boards available to you for your team for each of the modules. So when you go into the Learning Lab sections on our classes, you'll see we'll have posted optional discussion boards where you can meet with your MLC group for that module. You are not required to have your discussion in the space, and there's certainly no penalties for meeting outside of Brightspace. We just want to make sure we're offering you a space within the course to meet. And if you manage to end up in a group where you all live in the same area, you are more than welcome to meet with each other in person.
So now on to some tips. So I've used MLC groups in I think 4 courses now, so this will be my 5th time using this process. And so based on my own experiences and talking to my previous students, I've put together some tips for you. So the first one is the first week is really confusing. And this isn't so much a tip as it is a reassurance. So the MLC group work is more complex than a lot of the traditional online discussions you'll see in online courses. So kind of the traditional, you go on the discussion board, you make one post, and then you respond to 2, and then that's it. I find, at least in my experience with this type of approach, that learning is really shallow, and a lot of students will just kind of do this the night before it's due, and there's just less class engagement. So the MLC process is more complex and it has a lot of roles, but in my experience, once you've done one of these cycles and you get more into the rhythm of it, it becomes much easier. My second but probably biggest tip would be update your portfolios regularly. So the portfolio portion of this assignment should be relatively easy, so long as you're staying on top of it. And then also engaging in these reflection questions will contribute to your own learning and personal growth throughout the semester. So if you leave this all until the very end of the semester, it is going to be far more difficult and you aren't going to get as rich of a learning experience from this process. And it can also be really difficult to remember what happened in each module. So make a habit of going in even maybe once a week and just adding even some bullet points, which you can always go back to and elaborate on later, but just don't leave it until the end. My next tip is use your EBIs to improve your group work. So try to come up with some actionable ideas too in your portfolio. So say if you found in your first meeting that everyone was kind of all over the place and you're going off on tangents, perhaps suggest that in future weeks you might want to have an agenda to help guide that discussion. Not only will this help improve the group process, but students who include these sorts of things in their portfolio tend to get higher marks. And speaking of agendas, as I mentioned earlier, if you're doing synchronous meetings especially, having an agenda or some sort of guide for your discussion can make things go a lot more smoothly. And I would encourage you to, if you're doing an agenda, work in some time to chat with your group members, check in with each other, see how your other courses are going, things like that. My next tip is one that's a little bit more difficult for some people, but I do recommend trying to meet synchronously if possible. So I found with previous groups that it's easier to have much richer discussions when meeting synchronously. You're able to pick up on things like tone that may not come through as clearly in written work. Previous students who've met synchronously say that they really look forward to having these meetings, and some of them were actually meeting weekly even though I only asked them to do it once a module. And most synchronous groups also spend some time catching up and talking about their lives, other courses, assignments they're doing, things like that. So it becomes a nice little online community for you. I know this isn't possible for everyone, especially those of you who work in healthcare or other jobs like this that have a lot of shift work. Different time zones can also make it difficult, although I find in my experience, usually the groups that have the biggest time zone differences are usually the ones that are most committed to trying to meet synchronously. So I've even had people like staying up until 10 o'clock at night so they can talk to people in different time zones. For example, I've had groups that had people across North America, China, and Australia, and they still managed to meet synchronously, which was pretty impressive. This can also be difficult for some learners with exceptionalities, for example, a hearing impairment. However, in such situations, you can still meet synchronously. You would just then want to do a text-based option. So for example, you could meet synchronously and talk to each other through text on WhatsApp. And then my final tip is make your portfolio your own. So the portfolio is meant to capture your learning and your reflections, so really make it unique to you. And while yes, I do post some very specific questions, this is still meant to be very unique to your own learning process. So in the past, I've had students include things like mind maps that they put together on the readings because it was something that really connected with their teaching philosophy, and they kind of wanted to brainstorm how this was going to fit in with their philosophy. I've also had students include pictures and other artifacts from their learning and teaching. So for example, pictures of activities they have done in their own classrooms, lesson plans, things like that. I've also had some parents who reflected on the learning experiences of their own children and then kind of put a theoretical lens on it to analyze that situation. This is also a great way to make your portfolio more novel. And for those of you who are a little bit more extrinsically motivated, that's a good way to get a higher grade.
And an additional tip that I'd like to add here, especially since this course is on IPE, is to ensure that you're approaching your MLC groups with an interprofessional mindset. So do keep in mind that your team is going to be interprofessional. So some team members may have a difficult time contributing to the discussion, say if the activities or all of the questions are solely focused on one professional group. And that's it for now. I hope this video helped alleviate some anxieties surrounding the MLC process. Like I said, it can be a little confusing during the first module that we go through this process, but students usually really enjoy it once they get used to it. And as a reminder, this video is just an overview, so make sure you are consulting the syllabus and the MLC guide throughout the semester. And please do reach out to myself or to Angus if you have any questions.